Greetings to everyone, and welcome to our September edition of Earth Exchange Café. Our cafe is a place where we've been meeting for about 3 years, perhaps more than 3 years. We meet once a month to speak with people around the world who are thinkers, writers, artists, and people who have a really deep connection with the natural world and find some way in their personal life to share that with others through creativity or teaching or ceremony, preaching in some cases. So we've had many, many wonderful conversations, which you can hear most of them on our website, radicaljoy.org. And today we have another edition of that with a wonderful guest we're looking forward to talking with. But first, I would like to invite you to just be here and be present. Let whatever else is going on in your life drift away for right now and be here with this cafe. Imagine that you are in a cafe that you often frequent, a warm, inviting, friendly place where, if you'd prefer to be alone and read or work, you're welcome to do that too. If you want to talk, that's welcome. And perhaps you have some coffee or tea that you're drinking or some hot chocolate. And there's low muted conversation in the background. There are books to read and magazines that are available. There's some soft music playing, not too loud, so you can still have a conversation, but loud enough to appreciate. And you just settle back and know that for the next hour, all you need to do is listen, absorb. Perhaps you have questions that you're welcome to put into the chat if you're listening on Facebook. And we will be here together for about an hour. And I would now like to introduce my colleague and co-host, Harriet Sams, in Northern England, and she will introduce and lead the conversation with our guest.
Thank you so much for that beautiful opening, Trebby, and welcome everybody to the cafe. It's an absolute delight to have Brigid Hopkins to chat with us today in our virtual cafe. And Brigid is someone I've known virtually through the wonders of Zoom and the internet for a few years now. Brigid has worked animistically with the land for many years. She creates art and community with what she finds there, working through workshops and one-to-one practices. She's also written a book in 3 volumes, Love Letters to the Earth, and yes, consistently offers workshops which offer guidance and reconnection and belonging. So Brigid, welcome.
Thank you both. I'm really happy to be here. A little nervous, but yeah, I'm excited.
Nervous-sighted, as
yes.
children would say.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, well, it's just wonderful to have you here. And we're all very interested in your work. Some of us who are watching this won't know what your Impermasculptures are, and the Clarity Path, which is a website that you have set up and run for your business. So would you like to explain a little bit about your work, about Impermasculptures, and anything that feels right in the wonderful nurturing community that we have in Radical Joy?
Well, I love that I'm in conversation around Radical Joy, because that has been an aim of mine for many years now. And it's not only radical, but it's also revolutionary when it comes to, I have a heart of an activist, and I learned about activism through charge the gates. And, Radical Joy is a form of quiet activism. It's a very steady presence and a consistent vibration in our world that, we are aware of what's going on, and we choose to keep our attention in a joyful place. And that in and of itself through these hard times is quite radical. It's been a painful transition these last couple of years, a very challenging transition. So this practice that has developed organically in my life has helped me to really stay rooted and connected to place. And, so the clarity path is my coaching. I am a professional coach. I help people in a variety of ways, but I've been turning more inwardly in that professional environment. I no longer have a website. I found I wasn't tending to it, and that isn't something that I care to keep alive, if you will. Like, I can't nurture it, so why am I allowing that to exist? And right now, I'm in a process of really being firmly in local community and tending to our homestead. So it's been a big pivot for me over the last couple of years. But the practice of impermasculptures that we're here to talk about today has really been a saving grace in so many ways. And it's taught me more about my inward landscape and who I am as an individual, as opposed to a persona that was overlaid on top of me, you know? So it's been an outward, inward journey these last 5 years or so.
Wow. And that's so interesting. And we can certainly weave that in, because what I think we've all experienced with talking to people over the last few years is that there's no firm divide between business and personal, and that actually Radical Joy has realized just how fully embraced it is on that spiritual level, with people's soul searching, essentially. What is it about devotional practices, ritual offerings, being in connection, that speaks to part of me, as well as being an activist on the outside, as you mentioned? And it almost, in a sense, seems to be that, if you can maybe explain a little bit about what the impermasculpture is, and maybe show us some pictures if you've got them, which I think you have ready. That it's that intersection, isn't it? Perhaps where staying with the trouble, being in attendance to the place and to yourself as witnesser, is something very personal as well as activist. But yes, please explain more. Wow, what a picture.
Absolutely. So this was one of my first teachers, this beautiful, I call it a hornet, but I know that it's a wasp. Just bear with me. But we were on our way to our son's football game, and I was, lagging behind a little bit for whatever reason. And this hornet was laying in the middle of the pathway, and everyone just kept stepping over it and stepping over it. And it broke my heart. I immediately stopped and said, this was a living being that has passed away and is on a public sidewalk, and no one has noticed. And if this were human, what would be different, right? There would be mass chaos if there were a human body there, right? But this hornet, who is a vital part of our ecosystem, was not acknowledged. And she was one of my awakeners. So I went and I gently picked it up and took it over to this little area and asked the clovers, would they be willing to sacrifice to be a part of this offering? And they, there was no resistance. So this is where it began for me, really, was with this encounter and me being awake enough or aware enough of my environment to say, wow, something about this is not okay with me anymore. And then, through other experiences, sorry, hold on 1 second here. I'm going to stop sharing just to orient myself. Okay. I want to go back to the proper file, and I clicked on something when we began. Okay.
Are you okay? I was wondering that just to pick up on this incredible comment that you made about asking the clover if they would be willing to be part of that impermasculpture. Can you speak a little bit more about how the objects that you choose or get chosen become part of the impermasculpture?
So often, some of these images that I'm sharing were earlier and later images. So I went from live offerings to things that were collected that had already fallen to the ground. That was part of the evolution itself. But everything that was done with great temperance and respect. You know, it wasn't in a hurried way. It wasn't in a dominant way of, I want you, so I'll take you. It was never from that angle. It was, you know, I see that you're here and would you like to be a part of this? Right. And so when I saw the clover and I wanted to make, you know, I think about funerals and how flowers are traditional in funerals, you know, that was in our culture, how I was raised. So that was why the clovers called my attention that day. It was like, I would like to leave flowers for Hornet. But as time has gone on and I've continued to walk and listen and attend, you know, we were speaking before we got on, excuse me, our call about attention, right? And attending comes from deep attention to a specific place, right? And that's done through listening to the area itself. You know, what is the pulse that is happening there? Not so much me, but what am I stepping into and onto, and how am I arriving, right? And why am I there in that moment? And so it's been this unfolding process, and it's been the land itself that has really taught me. I say the land, but I'm including all elements, right? It's not just earth, it's wind and water and fire. So it's been a layer by layer. You know, we talk about in personal development like the onion, right? But I think there's a part of the onion that doesn't often get expressed, which is this unlearning and deconditioning, right? And the land has been my teacher around that.
So say more about what you mean by that, the unlearning and deconditioning.
Yeah.
And how is that part of the onion?
Yeah. So I, you know, grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm still here. I went through traditional education. You know, that is adding to the onion, right? It's growing the bulb, you know. My mother was Catholic and we, you know, we're in a very Irish Catholic community. So there's that addition to the bulb. But as I was coming into myself and really wondering about why am I here? What can I possibly offer to this world while I am here breathing? That is the deconditioning process. It's unlearning what I was taught about, you know, being an acceptable person, being an appropriate person. You know, others might call it rewilding, but it wasn't. It was a different type of taming. It was almost taming this inner fire of, you know, ambition and drive and, you know, need. I had a high need to be somebody, but to the earth, I always am me. And I don't need to be anything more because it's everything, right? So that's the layers of the onion that I have been deconditioned of, you know, this sense of like I'm not enough or I'm never going to get there. And it's like just sit here for a while and be with me because you're already here.
Beautiful.
Trevi,
Thank you.
yeah, that is beautiful. And so this picture that you've brought up, is that one of the earlier ones? You said that this was one that you'd chosen or there were living parts. And can you explain what was the moment or what was it that helped you move from that learning to an unlearning where you'd rather have just things that were already fallen or had been discarded by the beings already? Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, there was one place that I spent the majority of my time learning, and it was the public park that my children and I had gone to for years and years and years. But we always went there with this sense of like, we're here to take what we want and do what we want. But there was a ceremony that I had had, and in that ceremony, again, something else awoke in me. And it was in that time that I started to go and just quietly walk, almost like a meditative walk. And through those walks, day after day, it was a consistent arriving for 4 years straight. Um, the land was showing me that it was in its own process and it actually didn't want to support life of seeds or plants that I was bringing in. So please don't do that. We can't support that life, right? So I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then they were showing me their own seeds and the necessity of those seeds falling and why they're falling in a specific place, and to, leave them or maybe be the carrier to a different place that's ready to receive. So it was this constant conversation, right? So when I say like deep listening and deep attention, it is going both ways. It's a two-way conversation. But this space was learning about me and learning about the ways that I listen and learning about, am I a person that says one thing that does another? Or am I in integrity and will do as I say, right? So it was a constant building of understanding the request and knowing whether or not I could honor that request. Because just as the land can say no, so can we.
Mm. Yeah. So there's something in there about you're listening. So I'm just trying to sort of break this down because as people will be hearing this, there may well be a lot of activists or philosophers, but maybe not a lot of sort of ecologists or with people with ecological understanding. So on one level, you're saying ecologically and biologically, I don't want to bring in an invasive species unwittingly because I'm creating something that might bring it into a place where it's not meant to be, and that the intention could somehow unwittingly could backfire on a level that we're not necessarily aware of. But there's also something in what you're saying about really an assumption that there is something to hear, if that makes sense. That actually, as we're in these places where the difficulty, or a difficult place, for instance, or a beautiful place, or whatever is the motivation, there is something to hear. And perhaps it's easier for people to in beautiful, pristine landscapes where there's forests and lots of ecology, it may be easy to think, oh yeah, this is a living landscape. But what you're working with are things that are dead, that have passed on, that there may be woundedness. Maybe can you maybe explain how you hear that kind of place, if you do?
Yeah, so I'll answer. There's two questions in there. And the first one I'll go back to about the invasives and the impact ecologically. So I look at it like this. We have neighbors in most of our communities, right? And if you had a neighbor that had multiple people that it were taking care of, right, that they're taking care of, would you go to their door and ask them to take care of your laundry and your dishes and your cooking for the day? Would you feel that that was a reasonable ask of a neighbor that is already burdened? Right? We would feel very uncomfortable doing that, right? But yet we'll go into environments and just unload, either energetically or physically, our debris, whatever it might be. And we don't even think about it. So it was in this space where it was already in transition. And I too was in transition. So we were a perfect pair, right? I was wanting to learn from, firsthand experiences and not other teachers or books. I really wanted to learn, how does one listen in a very noisy world? Like, how do I do this? Right? How do I keep my attention on something long enough to actually hear it when it's imperceivable, right? So it was about the body and allowing my body the time in the place, right? So setting the clock down, setting the needs of our home down, or the expectations of me as a woman and an individual in the community to the side as I entered this place. And entering this place from a more neutral position within myself of, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how I can help. I don't know if I'm needed, but I will be here. And just starting to feel, when we're really quiet, we can start to feel the vibration of the environment. And that vibration is communication. It's a wave, it's a pulse. And the way that that comes into our bodies begins to connect with our way of understanding things, right? But there's also discernment. Is this a yes for me? Is this a no for me? Right? There were parts of the park that were very scary to me, and I didn't want to enter. And I respected my body's sensation of not now, not yet, not now. And I would experience that same sensation from parts of the park that I was really interested in going into. But the part of the park was saying, not yet, not now. So there's also this connection point within these vibrations. So I'm emitting vibrations, and the land is emitting vibrations. And when we come into coherence, which is like two magnets that are a perfect match, that's when a lot of beautiful things that begin to take place, right? But when we're not in coherence and there's this tension, it takes a type of discernment to listen to that tension too, because it's not informing us that something's wrong. It's just we're not a match yet.
Before we move on to this beautiful picture here, there's something that's coming up there about the discernment that may be relevant to radical joy, which is and I'm just sort of thinking about this, and between us three we can maybe make that sacred third that we were talking about, that we can just create an answer or a further inquiry, where often people have full intentions of going to a place to honor it in some way, so to make an act of beauty, and then for some reason there's a reluctance and it just doesn't happen. And often we think, oh well, time's got away from them, they haven't managed to do it yet, and there's a lot of maybe excuses that can come up. And it strikes me, just hearing you, how radical what you're saying may be to even the most radical of thinkers, where perhaps we need a space, and you're really modeling this, a space to be able to say, I really wanted to go into a place, I had full intention to go there, knowing its history, knowing its life, and I had the wish, but the place itself was somehow making me feel reluctant to be there. Mm-hmm. And that's very striking to me. And I wonder whether there's any more thoughts about how you've experienced that, perhaps, and how you've come to terms with being able to even express that to mm-hmm. people.
Yeah, it's a dance. It's this, it's a way of attuning inside of yourself where you're not overriding that instinct, right? Because I could immediately come up with 1,000 stories of why, right? Why this doesn't feel right now, but that's not why it's happening. There may be a different ask. Like sometimes what I have found historically in my own experience, it's a kindness of that place because it sees me more accurately than I'm seeing myself. And it's saying, you're not ready for this yet, right? Or I'm not ready to reveal my secrets to you yet. which reminds me, I have this beautiful, beautiful stinging nettle right outside of our kitchen window. And I have been called to work with nettle for 2 years now. And it was very elusive for me. I knew of areas where it grows and I had seen it there, but then when I would go, I wasn't able to find it. And I was so confused by all of this. And now she's actually, living on our homestead right outside the kitchen window. But it's been day after day of me having nettle infusions and, clearing out toxins in my body and nourishing my body for me to be ready for her to reveal a secret, right? So just a few weeks ago, it was an early morning and the sun was coming, just over the horizon. And nettle was this beautiful golden yellow. And all of us that know stinging nettle know that she's deep, deep green. But in her history and in her legend, she used to be golden. And she changed her color as self-preservation because she was being over-harvested, right? But here she was on this morning, and she was so golden and beautiful. And then I was watching these wisps of mist come off of her, and they would just float by. And I thought, wow, what is happening right now? And here it was a fly dancing on the umbels of her flowers that were releasing the pollen to go into the air. And I just stood there and wept because it's been a constant process of my own soma to be ready to be in relationship with her, to watch this beautiful fertilization process take place. It was so quiet and still, and the fly was working with her and the sun was working with her. And I was able to be there in that moment to witness this sacred event, right? But that came from me not rushing the relationship and not forcing something that wasn't ready to happen.
Yeah, that's really that. And those kinds of moments when they happen, and I know what you're talking about, those kinds of moments. And there's a sense that I have when I am given to witness those kinds of things where it's almost like, wow, I am being invited to witness something that this world that surrounds me all the time, and that I have, for the most part, such a superficial relationship with. It's like being called in to witness a sacred ceremony that most mortals don't get to witness. The color, the mists of pollen rising in, the awareness that it was a fly doing this. I mean, and then after having cultivated this relationship with that plant over such a long amount of time, it's such a beautiful image.
Mm-hmm. And, Trev, it goes to the idea that we're not really working with a clock. We're working within our own system of readiness. And we so often are not able to hear that I'm ready or I'm not ready because we're told that we should. We're told that we must, right? And it needed to happen 5 minutes ago. That's the world that we're, trying to help bring consciousness to right now through these acts, these joyful acts, this joyful presencing of, I don't want to dominate you. I don't want to hurry you along, but I want to be here and I want to learn how to be here in a non-imposing way. And it's not perfect. I mean, I've trampled things. I have, hurt things. I've hurt myself while trying to do things. I have been unavailable to human relationships because I've been so immersed in, with the land beings and these practices. So, there's no sense of perfection at all. There's just not. It can be very messy. But there are also these magical, magical moments that are accessible to all of us if we're willing.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And now to your picture, maybe brings in a question that I was wondering about. When we're at a place for whatever has called us to be there, and then what comes out of us obviously is part of what we have conditioned ourselves and we've learned and unlearned. And so this picture for me instantly makes me think of a feminine figure, possibly the Virgin Mary. It looks like there's some sort of whittled pedestal, but the rest of it is organic. So I'm imagining that there's quite a story about your artistic interpretation of what you've been called to bear witness to in this. And I suppose my question is, when you're creating the Impermasculpture, how much is you and how much is the place, the beings that you're in connection with for what comes out?
Mm-hmm. Impermasculptures has developed into a sort of channeling, right? So we know of channels that will do writing and, readings. And this is more of like a quiet channel of, I've tuned into something here, and now I'm going to try to transmit what, this broadcast is into something visual, So this was down by Lake Erie. I spend a lot of time by Lake Erie, predominantly because water is very, very important to all of us. And to learn from such a body that seems ancient, right? That has experienced so much and, leaves offerings on the shore and, takes things back. And so it was the day of sitting along the shoreline and making offerings and listening. And this beautiful green goddess came onto shore, so it was one of the algae that came up and some of the driftwood. But this particular area along the lake shore has been opening to me over the years. And there's a lot of feminine healing that's been taking place right in this one spot. And it's along the root system of a cottonwood tree. And so this offering was on a fallen piece of driftwood right by the cottonwood tree that has been showing a lot about the history of this area, and especially to the feminine. And the cottonwood itself, I shared this in our class together, Harriet. I was there in the spring, and when high winds come, the cottonwood branches will break and her medicine will come down to the shoreline. And I was there that day after high winds the night before, and I was collecting all the branches that have the cottonwood buds on them because I make a infusion. I take the buds and put them in olive oil. And the tree sent this surge of energy through me that just immediately made me weep. But they were not tears of sadness or sorrow. It was these tears of soulful joy of like, thank you. Someone finally is collecting my medicine. Like I'm always offering my medicine and no one is here to take it. And like how that makes the tree feel by giving and giving and giving and having no receivers, right? So when I think about like the feminine principle, and the feminine is receptive, right? But again, these were two different occurrences that happened in a grand span of time. So it's being in a place frequently if you can, but that doesn't mean that it's a must, right? But being wherever we are with as much of ourselves available as we can. And that is with our grief and our joy. Our grief is just as valuable in our world and in these landscapes, as our joy is. I think they're the same thing.
That's so beautiful. And lovely.
I
Thank
just
you so
stopped sharing
much
for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful stories as well with that. And just to reflect on that last thing that you said about when we're at that place where we know a place, whatever that is, Lake Erie we know has had lots of pollution, as well as the beautiful cottonwood tree that is so alive, so vibrant, and still giving as it would do. That's what it wants to do. And there's something in there about how so often we just take without even thinking. We don't even, we plow the field, we sow the seeds, and then we take and we take and we take, and that's what we do. But then going to the cottonwood trees scatterings, and then taking with gratitude and wonder for what you're going to produce for beneficent healing reasons, is right relationship. It's right relationship, because we are part of an earth that gives as well as it takes. And that's such an important teaching, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, doing it with mindfulness. I'm not over harvesting. I'm not taking more than we will possibly use. And also thinking about how the transformation of it coming through our system, right? So our family will be utilizing those cottonwood buds and then putting them back in to the system, right? In a different manner. So it is sacred reciprocity. It's a constant transformation of, that being coming through, our channel or our conduit, if you will, which, this Impermasculpture was, through the work that I've done, I found that areas give bones when they're really ready to work with me, right? It's almost like now's the time, right? We're going to go deep and we're going to like really get in there. And this particular bone, when I found it, it was correlating to our ancestral lineage, right? And I've been doing a lot of ancestor work with my mother line and my father line. But my mother line was the more repressed line when it comes to like our abilities, our intuitive abilities, and what we can do while we're here. So these places and these experiences are not only in one timeline or in a linear reality. There are ripples, right, and reverberations that go all over the place. So, sometimes I'm doing ancestor work in a particular space. And when I was saying like grief and joy, there's a lot of grief that has come through from the ancestor line of, things that they would want to make right or repair, and when I think about where we are right now in our world, it's, we have the opportunity to make amends with the history while still creating something beautiful in our future. Like those two things can coexist at the same time.
And the
Tell
bones.
us about this one here. What the one the bone? It's beautiful, and the little the stems of the plants are that same lovely rose color as the flower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are pokeweed. They grow here on our homestead, and pokeweed is a very potent plant that's in herbalism. It's not recommended to use, but it is poison medicine, right? If you're a really, really seasoned herbalist, you may tend to work with the roots to make tinctures. I am still learning from pokeweed, from the berries and the stems themselves, but we used to use them to make dye when our children were little. We would use it as a natural dye. But, I think about when this was being laid down, it was in reverence to the women of my line that didn't get to fully embody their magic while they were here. And they hid it and they suppressed it, right? And so it was an offering to release that grief and regret while allowing my own sense of magic and ability keep blooming and blossoming in this lifetime.
Mm. Yeah. And would you say that this was a channeling in the same way as the earth listening happens? Can you describe whether it's a similar process?
Yeah, that would be a really interesting distinction. I don't know if I have an answer for that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Because it's so in the moment. Like I'm not sure. I don't know if I can parse it out that finely yet.
Okay, well, that's one
a great question.
I'd like to learn about the workshop that the two of you did and what that was like, what it was for and what happened.
Yeah, it was around the leading edge of perception. So a lot about what we're speaking of right now. But we worked with the teacher being tree. So we invited everyone that participated to, be in a space and see if there's a tree willing to make a connection. We took them through several different processes to welcome that potential connection and then see where that connection may go, or what may transpire, for the individuals.
And it was based on the model of rootedness into the trunk that holds a sense of identity, and then out to the branches, and then the very beautiful tendrils of manifestation at the edges when we touch the world with our creativity, whether it's a leaf or a blossom or a berry or a catkin or a pine cone, whatever it is that we give to the earth, and it comes from this rootedness. And we were asking the teacher being to sort of guide us, and it was during springtime, so we went from early spring to lovely fecundity of mid-spring. So we were literally allowing the sap to rise in us as we were bringing each other through the tree system, the root system. And we and the last of the cycles was, of course, the letting it go. We've done our beautiful creations of these flowers and these petals and these berries and these pine cones, and now we're letting it all go to not only nourish us again, but to be offered out to the world for whoever would walk past us, being it a human or a non-human, an animal, another tree, whatever, so that we are constantly in reciprocity with the world because of being part of this system. So essentially it was that, and it was just wonderful to have Brigid along, and while we were co-facilitating that, it was wonderful. And that was for the Tariki Trust. So we may be coming to the end, but I wonder whether there's a part of your book, Love Letters to the Earth, a poem or a short prose that you feel called to read to us.
Well, it just so happens I have them here. So let's see. So I have one that was calling to me when I was preparing for our time together today, and it's called Mother's Hand. But there was this other one that came from the conversation that we began to have before we got on the call about AI. Do you still want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about both those things.
Okay. So I'll read the first one. It's called No More. And, this is, when I think about what's taking place in the world right now, this, transition that's happening with the technology and the rapidness of technology, and my own internal mechanism saying, slow down, slow down. Don't go that way, slow down. Um, because we all have our own pace and our own rhythm within the greater landscape. And so this urging from inside of myself of don't speed up, right? That is a form of activism, really, because I'm not getting taken in the current of, wherever things are going when it comes to AI. But in my own personal heart around this, I'm not anti-technology. I would never have met Harriet and Trev. I would never have met you if I didn't, if we didn't have technology. So there are advantages, right? But I think the greatest thing that technology will not replace is the uniqueness that is in each one of our souls. That is not replicable. You can try, but you can't, right? And so this particular passage spoke to me around that particular conversation. It's called No More. No more false sense of intimacy. No more I am fine. No more smiles when I'm sad. No more laughter when I'm gutted inside. No more being there when I can't hold my pain. No more doing when I am exhausted. No more listening when my mind is full. No more hiding when I need help. No more pretending my feelings are silly, misguided, or unnecessary. No more sparing another when it no more sparing another when it costs my integrity. No more shaming myself when I have nothing to be ashamed of. No more lying to myself when I know what I want. No more stifling my voice when it's my portal of courage. No more avoiding my inner work when it's the only way through. No more I can handle it when I'm scared. No more believing another's opinion of me when I know who I am. No more, no more. All I can do to be true is say this. No more hiding who I am from you.
And that's from Love Letters to the Earth. Is that
Yes, volume 2.
volume 2? Yeah, I want to say that Brigid has written 3 volumes of poems called Love Letters to the Earth, and they're available on Amazon. And you also wrote a memoir
I did.
called Feathers of the Phoenix, which is beautiful, beautiful, talking about your difficulties coming up and growing up, and how you well, you had a message of a vine, and you saw a vine climbing up a tree, and you said to yourself, like, that's me, I'm like that vine, I'm climbing up to the sun, and it's not always easy. But anyway, it's really, really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, my mother struggled with addiction issues. So coming into the world early, there was a birth trauma, and then dealing with her struggles of being human, and then choosing, as a mother myself to 3, how am I going to do this when there's no roadmap to really follow? Like, how do we live an impassioned life, an embodied life, when there was no teacher for it?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's a question that has a and this answer. It's never a 101 ways to be a good parent. It's and this, and today, and this connection, and the no more, as well as the this is who I am, the line in the sand, the squiggle that is the RadJoy bird at a quarry. All of these are ways to say, this is who I am, and this is all I can say. I think that's so moving, and it's a wonderful reminder as a parent myself. Very, very empowering. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that has come through recently around that, if I can speak on it for a moment, I was taught, and there's a lot of conversation around, the generational trauma, and, parents knowing to do better or being better in some way. It's something that I've, caught glimpses of throughout my lifetime. But what I really recognize is each of the experiences I think that we have were preparation for what we're really here to continue, right? So it's like my mom could only go so far in her lifetime. And I could hold a lot of judgments about the way she went about things. But inevitably, she was teaching me how to continue, not in that way, right? Not that it was wrong or I could do better, but it was like you have all the preparation you need to now continue on in our line for what's next, right? And it was a very healing and repairing awareness when that came through. It was like, you're right.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
are preparing them, and we've been prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, we have. And just maybe to close on a reflection of the practices, all of these practices which we tie together, which is we inhabit and have inherited and no doubt perpetrate in our own ways, in knowingly or unknowingly, that we belong in a wounded world and that there's mistakes and confusions all around, and that those moments of just stilling, being present and grounding and feeling the body saying, I'm here, I'm listening, is, oh, my internet says it's unstable, but I'll keep going.
Yeah, we heard you.
Okay, is in itself almost like everything's in the room at once, but it's also just not there too, and it's you and that space. And I think that that's actually very, very important when we're working at that shadow space, where we're working with wounded land, we're working as wounded humans in messy environmental, climatic, scientific, sociological spaces, to just inhabit that space of stillness before we then give our rituals and give our gratitude and whatever comes from the practice. And I think that you embody it and teach it so beautifully, so movingly, and it's a real honor to hear you speak, Brigid, about your experiences and your wisdom.
Thank you for the platform, Harriet. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brigid, for the conversation. Thank you, Harriet. And as we come to the closing of our Earth Exchange Cafe for this month, we invite you, first of all, to join us in October, and I'm quickly going to look up the date. October 11th, we have Rachel Fleming, who is the founder of Animate Earth, a really important, wonderful new organization. And now, as we prepare to leave the Earth Exchange Cafe in September, thanking Brigid Hopkins, and you have finished your coffee, your tea, or your chocolate, and the music is turned off now. The lights are dimming. They're getting ready to close for now. And so gradually you push back your chair, you say goodbye to your friends who are there, with whom you've had a wonderful conversation, with whom you've perhaps spent some time talking about the things that Brigid has shared, and you prepare to go out the door for this month. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in October. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.